with Senator Rob Olson, the Republican, versus Spencer Kerfoot, the Democrat, and the first candidate to speak will be Spencer Kerfoot. And you will have 1 minute for your opening remarks.
Okay. Hi, my name is Spencer Kerfoot. The district that I'm running for is basically all southeast Olathe. That's the other half of the city. I am a product of Kansas schools, flat out and simple. And what got me to run was essentially I saw decreasing opportunity for the generations behind me, especially in comparison to the opportunities I received when I was growing up. And basically that's not okay. And I am hoping to serve in the Kansas Senate so that we can give people the opportunities that they deserve and that they used to have before the governor became the governor. I am fretfully concerned about our budget. I think it's out of control. Our credit rating has been downgraded 3 times, and that's not appropriate. And that is a direct cause of an unbalanced budget for the last 5 years under Governor Brownback's leadership, and also, more importantly, the voting record of my opponent and pretty much every incumbent possibly in the room, but I don't know everyone here. Essentially, if we want to have good business here, good schools, good roads, we have to fix the budget. And that means responsible revenue reform we have to work on.
All right, thank you. Your first question for 1 minute. What are your views on the budget and state tax policy? Are there tax or spending policies that you would add or change? And please be specific.
First and foremost, I would like to lower our sales and property taxes. Something not discussed yet is the fact that we have the highest sales tax in the nation on food and the 3rd highest general sales tax. That is a direct result of Senator Olson. That bill was about to fail in the Senate, and he switched his vote at the last minute and let it pass by the skin of its teeth. We now see tens of millions of dollars leaving this county to Missouri. That's not just consumer spending, that's revenue for your business. That's people going, wow, I don't want to pay that tax, and they literally drive 10 minutes east. That sort of system doesn't work. Now, yeah, it means that for us to balance that out, if we lower sales and property taxes, we've got to raise taxes elsewhere. I think basically rewinding the clock and pretending that Governor Brownback never happened is the best foot forward. That does mean raising income tax, but you know what? That also means lowering your property taxes.
Question number 2 for 1 minute. What are your views on K-12 education funding in Kansas? How do you envision a new school finance formula, and would it include school vouchers, individual tax credits, or other voucher-like programs for private school tuition?
In one sentence, I'm a very big proponent of public education. I don't think tax credits or vouchers are a solution to really any problem. If you've got a public school that doesn't work, the solution is not to give up on it and undermine it with vouchers. The solution is to do the hard work, you know, the thing that no one likes to do, and actually work with community leaders and help that at-risk school get better. Now, that being said, what do you do to solve education funding? Well, first you make sure it's adequate, then you make sure it's equal. You make sure that every county throughout the state, including Johnson County, but also those western counties, have a fair shot at a future. And frankly, that means we've got to do things like have caps on the LOB. It means that we have to have state funding and state aid, that we can't be totally and completely reliant on local property taxes. That's how you do it. And to put it in one phrase, if we rewound the clock and went back to the old formula, I think that's a good step in the right direction.
Next question for 1 minute. In recent years, the legislature has diverted funding dedicated to the state's transportation program to pay for other purposes. Do you support dedicating sales tax revenue to specific purposes such as transportation, or do you support all state expenditures, including transportation, should be subject to the appropriations process where legislators determine the funding levels entirely?
You know, honestly, just like running a business, you've got to keep your options open. I don't necessarily think whether funds should or shouldn't be dedicated, but I do think in the power of context. If you're going to make a promise and start a fund for highways, keep your promise and keep those funds dedicated to highways. It's that simple. If we have highways adequately maintained, we have good business coming here to the county and frankly the rest of the state. Out in western parts, when you don't have a road, your community dies. It's no different even in a metropolitan area like here. So Do I think funds should be dedicated? Absolutely. But I think that as a general rule, as a legislator, the appropriations process should be flexible, not rigid, and everything should be taken in context.
Question number 4 for 1 minute. What are your views on local control, including recent legislation limiting local government property tax revenues without a public vote?
The closer a government is to the people, the better it tends to represent them. And more to the point, good government is also not a layer cake, but a marble cake. Any good government requires a cooperative relationship where both sides, in this case, the state and the city, or the federal government and the states, work together rather than constantly bicker. When you have Topeka basically telling cities what they can and can't do, that doesn't just undermine local control in the Kansas Constitution, it's also just really poor policy. When you strong-arm people into doing things, you take away their options, you take away that flexibility that I was talking about earlier. I specifically oppose the property tax lid outright. I don't have the time to explain why, but there you go. I also oppose completely the prohibition of city regulation on firearms. I think if a city would like to pass, relaxed or more rigid firearm regulation, they should be allowed to do so.
And closing question for 1 minute. What is the most important thing that distinguishes you from your opponent in this race?
Leadership. This is the first public forum that my opponent has attended this entire cycle. And I attend forums regardless of who hosts them, whether or not that host agrees with my ideology or not. I answer people's questions, and I do not hide behind a highly paid consultant. Leadership requires answering tough questions and, frankly, representing people you don't agree with. It means talking, in my case, to a conservative, and in Senator Olson's case, a liberal. It means engaging people in the community. And so far, I haven't seen that, at least in this cycle, for my opponent. It also means communicating. With respect to Senator Olson, he didn't have a Facebook page live until I joined the race. And that's a perfect example of what I mean by leadership. Having the courage and the audacity to engage people regardless of whether or not they agree with you.
Okay, thank you very much. And next up will be Senator, you have 1 minute for your opening remarks.
I want to start by thanking the Chamber and Gordon and everybody for coming out tonight. I've served in the Senate for 6 years. I chair utilities. I sat on Commerce, Fed and State, and financial institutions and insurance. I served 6 years in the House of Representatives. I was the majority whip over there. I've worked hard for my district. I work with my constituents from night and day when I get a call to fix their issues. And I'm just honored to be here to be able to serve them to fix their issues. And if you go to my Facebook page, you'll see I've got a lot of people that have wrote testimonies. And there'd be thousands more if I had the time to do them all. And I think that's the biggest part about this job, being honored to help people and work with your constituents. So look forward to the questions. Go ahead.
All right. There'll be big surprises, I'm sure, by now.
Yeah.
Question number 1 for 1 minute. What are your views on the budget and state tax policy? Are there tax or spending policies that you would add or change? And please be specific.
Sure. Well, I think a lot of states right now are struggling because our economy is flat. And let's be truthful, it has not seen any growth. But let me tell you, the areas where I would look at, and I think they kind of pertain to education as well, is you're seeing a lot of star bonds, tax abatements across this state. Something that we did not envision 20 years ago, or in '92 when we put the school finance formula into place. And what's going on is these abatements, we're seeing a lot less sales tax revenue go to the state and income tax over 20 years. And we've seen that greatly decline. So that's one area where I think, and it's in the hundreds of millions that we've lost, maybe even more than that. And I think we need to sit down and rethink our tax policy on star bonds, abatements, etc.
Next question. What are your views on K-12 education funding in Kansas? How do you envision a new school finance formula, and would it include school vouchers, individual tax credits, or other voucher-like programs for private school tuition?
You know, I support vouchers. I also support something we didn't touch on. Some school districts have virtual schools. I'm a big supporter of the virtual schools. Last year, this year, we had a special session. Well, a lot of people don't know, and I've got my run right here. The Senate Minority Leader put on our desk. And if you go back to the old formula, our school district in Olathe would have lost $500,000 in property tax. Well, last year in the special session, our county lost $4.2 million. It was projected at the first outset to lose over $5 million. We were able to protect our school district, and we did lose about $50,000, but at one time they had our school district projected to lose $500,000. Now, they just come out about 3 weeks ago proposing to send the other 80% of the LOB to Topeka. That'll be disastrous for Olathe and Johnson County. And that's what they're trying to do. If you don't have strong leadership that understands what's going on with the property tax, you'll be sending more of your money. And I guarantee you, I don't understand how you pay teachers more money when you lost $4 million. Tell me, how did you do that?
Next question, number 3. In recent years, the legislature has diverted funding dedicated to the state's transportation program to pay for other purposes. Do you support dedicating sales tax revenue to specific purposes, such as transportation, or do you support all state expenditures, including transportation, should be subject to the appropriations process where legislators determine the funding levels entirely?
It's been that way for years. There's been prior governors, Governor Sebelius, Governor Parkinson has used KDOT's revenues in the same exact way that's been going on right now. In the last 10 years, we've spent over $1 billion in Johnson County on new roads. Look at the highways out here. At 435 and 35, they're spending $300 million. Look on my Facebook page. I can show you a list of projects over the last 10 years been proposed. There's about $1.2, $1.3 billion in Johnson County. I believe we pay most of the taxes. We have a lot of the population. We need to spend the money. It's greatly improved our area, but it's been over a long period of time. And there's rural areas that you don't need 4 lanes, or when you go by Pleasanton, we're now on our second bypass of Pleasanton. So we've got our 3rd route of Pleasanton, Kansas in the last 30 years. Is that a good way to spend money? I don't know. I mean, I think, you know, we're doing a pretty good job, and I think we just need to keep on the path we're on.
Next question for 1 minute. What are your views on local control, including recent legislation limiting local government property tax revenues without a public vote?
I think people should have a vote and a voice in it. I've heard from a lot of cities, but a lot of my constituents that contacted me supported me in this because they've seen double-digit property taxes increase, and over the last 10 years, 100% tax increase. And a lot of my elderly people, especially, are concerned when they're on a fixed income and they can't afford $200 or $300 each year on their property tax going up. I'm sure the money's spent well, but I think the people need to have a voice in it too. So.
All right, and the closing question for 1 minute. What is the most important thing that distinguishes you from your opponent in this race?
Well, I think leadership in a lot of ways. I have worked on autism reform, championed it. It wouldn't have got out of the House or the Senate if it wasn't for me. It wouldn't have got to the governor. I've seen the results lately. I've also worked on the RPS renewal mandate, which I'm chair of utilities, so them are things I would be doing. The 111D mandate from the federal government. This year we passed a major telecom bill that's going to improve broadband service. Probably will be one of the unique places in the country where we'll actually, in the next 3 years, see hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions, and see our broadband service capability increase in tremendous amount.
All right, thank you very much, Senator Rob Olson and Spencer Kerfoot.